You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issue that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and friends, I think I've found another kindred spirit. I am so excited to celebrate my 1-year podcast anniversary by chatting with my friendship research hero, Dr. Bill Rawlins. I invited this prolific and passionate friendship communication researcher to join me in a discussion of what he has learned about friendship in his remarkable and inspiring 40-year career focused on understanding friendships. Y'all, he is amazing. So let me tell you a little bit more about him from the Ohio University's Scripps College of Communication webpage. According to his bio, William K. Rawlins, who earned his PhD at Temple University, is a Stocker professor in the School of Communication Studies at Ohio University. His book, The Compass of Friendship, Narratives, Identities, and Dialogues from 2009, received the G.R. Miller Book Award from 2012 from the Interpersonal Communication Division of the National Communication Association, which y'all know because I've done a lot of my interviews with other researchers at that conference. It also won the 2009 David R. Maines Narrative Research Award from the Carl Couch Center for Social and Internet Research. His book, Friendship Matters, Communication, Dialectics, and the Life Course from 1992 was selected as an outstanding academic book for 1993 by the editors of Choice, and also received the G.R. Miller Book Award in 1994 from the National Communication Association. In 2002, Professor Rawlins received the Theory That Has Left a Legacy Award, the dialectic perspective from the Communication Theory Interest Group of the Central States Communication Association. So one of the things that's quite amazing about Bill Rawlins is that the dialectic perspective that he will talk about and takes when focusing on friendship has left a legacy, that this is something that he's worked on for 40 years. And so from his first book in 1992 to 20 years later receiving a Theory That Has Left a Legacy Award, and then 7 years later writing another book about the work he's done. So it's no surprise that he's published extensively about the unique challenges and the dialectic tensions of communicating in friendships. And he continues in his research to address the aesthetics of interpersonal communication and the role of friendships in accomplishing the well-lived life for individuals and communities. It's so amazing. In addition, Professor Rawlins teaches courses in interpersonal relational communication, communication theory, embodied ethical and aesthetic perspectives on human communication, dialogue and experience, interpretive and ethnographic inquiry, communication and narrative, Gregory Bateson and communication theory, and communication and friendships across the life course. Let's just say he teaches some stuff, am I right? And he has won numerous teaching awards in 2013 and 2012. He's won mentor awards. I mean, his impact has not only been in research, but also in teaching and mentoring. And so I'm so excited that he accepted the invitation to be on Best Forevers. I think as you'll listen, you'll be able to hear how his research has influenced me as a teacher, a researcher, a podcaster, and as a friend. And I sure hope you'll hear his passion for friendship and discover so many things we know about friendship because of his dedication to research on the topic. Honestly, I can't think of a better way to celebrate 1 year of Best Forevers. So, Bill, thank you so much for being here on Best Forevers. It's so great to have you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Lisa. Thanks for asking me.
Yes, this is very exciting. And so can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those listeners who might not know you?
Okay, well, I'm the Stocker professor of communication studies at Ohio University, and I've studied friendships since 1978. It's been my life's work, and it's led me into some cognate areas and some related concerns for reasons that we'll get into probably in our conversation. So I teach courses on interpersonal, courses on friendship, communication theory, dialogue and narrative. Recently, I've developed a new course on the aesthetics of humane communication, and I use friendship and making music as exemplars of humane communication.
Can you give a little example of what you might do in that class?
Wow,
this is very fascinating. I've not heard of this. So.
Well, we spend about a month, reading John Dewey and looking at art as experience, so we get some good aesthetic theory on the table, and we just I just assigned a paper yesterday to analyze the film Il Postino and have the students notice, how do the characters in that film, what do they do to sort of make their lives beautiful and humane and aesthetic? How do they live in an artful way? Okay, now later on, I ask them to think about the rhythms of their life and what patterns their lives rhythmically and their relationships, and what are some of the constraints on how they may want the rhythm of their life to play out, and what changes would they make? So those are some ideas. A lot of discussion. I've done a performance piece in there, a 15-minute period that called Recovering Notes on Aging. That was a performance I did at the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry. I literally do it as a quote-unquote lecture.
That's amazing. And I think that there is something to be said about thinking about what we can do in our lives to have our lives be more beautiful. And I'm assuming if you apply it to friendship, it's how friends might be able to make that life more beautiful. But also, side note, I saw that film in film school, but it's been, when I took film class, I didn't go to film classes, but it's been a long time. So I don't think I could restate a whole lot, but I am starting to get a few images from that movie. I'll have to add it back onto a rewatch list.
That's nice. I love it. And you're right. In fact, when we were talking about John Dewey, maybe it was on Tuesday, and I asked them, when did you break off something beautiful, some activity that was beautiful because of the press of everyday life? And the first two examples had to do with friendship. The students were saying, I was involved in a really close friendship, someone I cared about, and I found less and less time for that person, and I got more and more involved in working at a couple places, and finally the friendship lapsed in ways that this student wished it hadn't. So it's interesting you had mentioned that.
Yeah, I feel like almost that my world lens is through friendship and how friends do make our lives fuller or wider or in this sense more beautiful. So what initially got you interested in friendship? I always joke that I came out of my mom's womb looking for friends, so that it always seems like something that was really key to my life. But what initially got you interested in friendships?
Well, good for you. It sounds like you in many ways were destined to study friendship. That's great.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was just going to point out something, and not in a way in which to make you feel bad, I guess. But you said you started studying in 1978. And guess when I was born?
When were you born?
1978.
I'll be darned. We've got some, we've got some good karma here.
Some
karmic wheel.
Yeah. Well, so what got you interested?
That's very nice. There's a couple things, and often, what is often the case with people who end up studying communication or social issues for their life's work, at least for me, is there are both personal aspects and then substantive professional aspects. And what happened was I was making music, and some of my closest friends are people I make music with, and some of my closest friends now were the people that I stopped playing music when I went to graduate school, because I wanted to be devoted to being a student and getting my master's and PhD in communication. And I was taking a course on relational communication, and I was taken with Art Bachner, my advisor, and I was reading in the area of friendship, and it was really, really overlooked in social inquiry at that time. You would see questionnaires that would say family, work, and other, to people in your life. And there was very little written about friendship. And what was written, I thought, really didn't really teach us much about what it meant to be friends and to communicate as friends and to live in friendship with someone else. So, and then the kind of really, the one thing that stimulated me immensely was a piece I came across by Robert Payne, a Canadian anthropologist who wrote a piece called "In Search of Middle Class Culture," and it just intrigued me so much. he homed in on friendship, and it really, the combination of missing my friends and seeing this tremendous gap in the literature, I just started gravitating towards studying friendship. And it actually captivated my scholarly imagination. So I've ended up studying it. This is the 1 year anniversary of your podcast. This is 40 years I've been studying friendship since 1978 this year.
Yeah. Like you said, it's karma. There's something here. There's some sort of maybe kindred spirit friendship connection here.
Very good.
And, I felt similar ways when I was in undergrad at Michigan State taking my interpersonal classes. And it's not, we had a lot more friendship research, some of what you had done at that time than when you were a student. But I still felt like when I was in classes, I was like, well, we're always talking about romantic relationships. And not everyone has romantic relationships. Not everyone has romantic relationships where they might feel like they can talk to someone, that they're not getting the support that they might want, or having someone to share activities with, whatever the case might be. So I found myself often going, well, what about, to the point where I think I irritated my classmates and potentially my teachers. But
good for you. Good for you. It's something we should be doing.
Yeah. Well, and one of my interpersonal teachers was Dr. Kelly Morrison at Michigan State University, who became my master's advisor. And one of the things I became interested in was that often friendship is seen as something positive, and it is. But I also was curious in the challenges that friendships have. And so my thesis was on jealousy in female friendships and how that operates and how it impacts the friendship. So
good for you.
So do you think, and this might be skipping ahead in the questions that I sent to you, do you think that we're still at a point where friendship, actually, I don't even know if it's a question on here at all. Maybe it's just a question that is sparked by this conversation. Do you think that friendships are still overlooked in social inquiry and academics or in culture? Where do you think friendship stands now, having done this work for 40 years?
Well, that's a very good question. As you probably well know, to me, there's a lot of unique features about friendship that positions it in a very, very special way in terms of social life, okay? I mean, right off the bat, friendship's a relationship of choice, okay? You can't force people to be friends, okay? People choose to be friends with each other, all right? Now, we'll come back to that, but you can contrast that with other relationships, okay? Family, you're born into a family. Your kin is always your kin. You can't not be someone's daughter, not be someone's sister. You're born into a family. It's a lifelong bond. When we talk about marriage, so family communication is talked about a lot. You talk about marriage, and marriage is both a legal bond and, for many people, a religiously sanctioned bond. So when you get married, you are married. And you cannot not be married until you have legally gotten a divorce and, in some religions, had the marriage dissolved. You are that person's, we could call this relationship spouse, partner. You can choose the language. And you don't just walk out of it. And even if you do walk out of it or go to the other side of the world, you are still that person.
You're still
legal,
linked.
Yeah, still linked. And then, of course, work relationships. You have contracts that keep people in work relationships. All of these relationships that are so significant in patterning our lives have kind of mechanisms of commitment that are in some ways external once they've been secured to the relationship. Friendship is an intrinsic connection. And this, for us communication scholars, friendships persist to the extent that both parties feel they are fulfilling each other's expectations. Those expectations are established through communication and living in friendship, and they can be violated through communication. So, I mean, it's now, and I think there's more and more and more attention paid to friendship. I mean, and that's good. At the same time, now let me just say, but friendship, the significance of friendship's been recognized if you're willing to read it since the 4th century before the Common Era. I mean, Aristotle said, friendships make life worth living. Okay.
Yeah.
Books 8 and 9 of the Nicomachean Ethics are about friendship. They are brilliant books, and they predict a lot of research traditions, if you will, complementarity and attraction, similarity and attraction. A lot of those, in some respects, variable analytic approaches. Okay, now, I think there's a lot of attention to it. I still think people are really, really eager to understand, about friendship. And one of the reasons, which I think you would know from having read Friendship Matters. I mean, one of the things I said early on is that kind of how you've said it, and it's important. People think of friendship in benign terms. Okay, they think of it as a benevolent relationship. But I'll ask anybody who I speak with, and I will say, I bet if you were to name some of the happiest moments in your life, they would probably be moments spent with friends. And I bet if you named some of the most hurtful moments in your life, it would very possibly and very well be some ways in which friends have hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I hope we'll talk about, the dialectical tensions of friendship. But for the moment, let me just also say that at the same time that I think many people are realizing, and as you live life for keeps, you start realizing the importance of friendship. There's more and more research by health practitioners that understand the significance of friendship to health, okay? Meanwhile, I'm sorry to say, I think the concept is being watered down. I think it's being watered down by social media. I think it was explicitly watered down by turning it into a verb, as it does on Facebook, friending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, friendships are formed, again, Aristotle said very wisely, it takes time and truth to establish a friendship, we have to do some growing older together, some time in each other's presence, some communication that, as you well know.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer for the moment. I hope it.
Yes. No, I think that makes sense. And I hadn't really thought about the action of friending. You friend people you don't know in some ways. And so it takes, you can be friends with someone on Facebook, but it's not, the way that they mean it is not the way that we would describe our closest friends, our true friendships, our kindred spirits, if you will. And so I get that, but I guess I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about that part of it. Did Facebook ruin friends?
No, because that's why I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't. And for many people, as we all well know, there's people who are isolated. There's people, it's very, very difficult for them to contact their friends, be contacted by friends. There's a lot here to cherish in social media. People later on in life, people who don't have the mobility that they may have once had or ever had, it's very, very important. Okay. However, at the same time, I think it's done a tremendous. It's made friendship seem much more superficial. Mm-hmm. I think I talk to a lot of people about this, and they say, they're spending less time with their friends. I mean, they chat once in a while, they post, they have tweets, not tweets as much as I was thinking of texts. Somehow that's a substitute for even voice-to-voice contact. Mm-hmm. Alfred Schutz talks about something that I really think is wonderful. He talks about sharing a vivid present. And that's something we do with our friends. He also uses the phrase growing older together. We grow older together in each other's presence. These are meaningful moments. And I mean, I really insist upon it as something really significant for, the friendships that we really consider our close friendships.
As I listen to you talk, all the things that you're saying just makes my heart for friends swell in a way that just makes me want to immediately call my best friend, who knows very well how I feel about her, and she's involved in the podcast. She's designed everything, and she's been on it, and we get to spend a lot of time together. But that's what I think of. We became friends when we were 17, and we're both 40 now, and that we get to grow old together. Now we're 40. Like, there's so many more years though still in which we can grow old together. So I'm loving this. This is great. But I also know that is not always the case. And so maybe this is a good time to bring in the dialectics part of, and so can you tell me how, for the listeners, I haven't talked about dialectics too much on the podcast. So can you describe what they are? I mean, I know what they are. Can you describe what they are and how you might use dialectics to understand friendship?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that recognizing the fact, I mean, when I first began doing my research on friendship, when I was listening to people speak about their experiences with friendship, when I was listening to them speak together in dyadic interviews, I was noticing the fact that there are inherent tensions in friendship. They're inherent. At the same time that friendship is celebrated, and rightly so, and considered to be this wonderfully edifying and benign relationship, there are inherent tensions. And I developed early on, and I will say that the first articulated dialectical perspective on relationships was my dialectical perspective on communication and friendship. And in terms of the dialectics that I have witnessed, I kind of talked about contextual dialectics and interactional. The contextual dialectics are the ideal and the real, the dialectic of the ideal and the real. And what we have here is there's a lot of ideals associated with friendship. However, in our workaday lives, we confront situations that, when I talk about the other tensions, quickly reveal those ideals to be very challenging to uphold. So there's realities of friendship, okay, that are always in tension with the ideals that people bring. In fact, nowhere does this happen in more pronounced ways than during adolescence, when people have these unbelievable expectations of their friends. And then when they're compromised, they're crushed. And sometimes they're reluctant maybe to even try friendship for a while, because these high expectations, these ideals, have been compromised, okay? So there's the ideal and the real. There's the public and the private. And this fascinates me. And in fact, Alysa, I teach in my upper division interpersonal communication course. I organize it around communication in public and private circumstances. And friendship courses in and out of public and private life. I mean, people, and I should actually mention here, just very succinctly, that another one of the really unique aspects of friendship is it's simultaneously a freestanding relationship. Like you and this woman that you mentioned that you've been friends with since you're 17, you are friends. But friendship can also be a dimension of other relationships. So you may have now made friends with your mom. Yes. Since you've become independent and you appreciate her for the person she is, and you're not compelled to have a relationship with her, you choose to be. And in my life and my life with my wife Sandy, we've been married 44 years, and our when we felt our children kind of reaching out to us because they enjoyed us as opposed to they had to, it's a great feeling. So
you're like, yes.
So friendship is both freestanding and a dimension of other relationships. So it can course in and out of public-private relationships, because you can be friends with your boss. And when you're at work, we're friends with a teacher. But when you're in a professional circumstance, you have to comport yourself in that way. When you're away from that in a private context, it would be odd to be acting like you act in a public context. So friends get into cross-cutting demands there. Shall I tell you about the 4
Yes,
interactions?
please.
And these really have a special place for me because I really and truly believe this is a robust collection of dialectical tensions. Okay, that we've already talked about too. Sometimes a dialectical view is boiled down to 3 tensions that I think are just don't cover as much nuance and significant challenges as the 2 I've already mentioned, and now the 4 I'm going to talk about now. The first one I call the freedom to be independent and the freedom to be dependent.
Yes.
Okay? And what I say in the compass of friendship is freedom lives at the heart of friendship. I mean, friends choose to be friends with each other. It's constantly a matter of living up to, expectations we've created with and for each other, and we choose to be friends, okay? So what I argue is when, say, you and I become friends, Alysa, I'm arguing that when we become close friends, we gift each other 2 freedoms. Freedom to be independent and the freedom to be dependent. Okay, so let's say we're living in the same city and we've been great colleagues, and then we become great friends, and then you have a really great offer to go somewhere else that wants you to start a friendship institute. I say, Alysa, I so value you as a colleague, and I so value your friendship, and you're part of me and part of my life here. You've got to do that.
Yeah.
You've got to do that. I'm giving you the freedom to be independent. I mean, you've got to do that. So, but, and here's the freedom to be dependent. If you ever need me, you feel free to call on me. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like an interweaving of these mutually gifted pairs of friendships to live our own lives, but also to feel free to depend on each other. And what causes the tension is, let's say you're in one of your most exciting independent phases, and I really need you.
Yeah.
And it may be hard for you to respond. Or what if we're both in really, really dependent mode, So, in that way we're kind of suffocating each other a little bit. I mean, there's a variety of ways that these freedoms can be in tension with each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got the freedom to be independent, the freedom to be dependent. A next one, which I think is an extremely significant one, is the dialectic of affection and instrumentality, which is to say, are we friends as an end in itself, or are we friends as a means to an end? Well, the fact of the matter is that there's always ways in which friends can help each other. And we just said friends need each other.
Yes.
Friends do things for each other, but the friendship's not reduced to this use of each other because there's also a tremendous amount of affection for each other. Okay, and friendship matters, and you and I have talked about this book before. But across the life course, these tensions kind of take on a variety of depth and significance because of where we are in the life course. Like, for example, and they're also very gendered in terms of people that are kind of living in kind of gendered ways. A lot of times, people that are sort of gendered male kind of emphasize, doing things for each other, getting things done, building the deck, instrumental expectations. And sometimes they might even be a little reluctant to be as affectionate. Traditionally, men haven't been encouraged to be as affectionate in their friendships as women are. Okay. All right. I don't want to overgeneralize here. These are like modal kinds of patterns. Okay. There's always going to be individual friendships that absolutely distinguish themselves from any of these patterns. Okay. So what I wanted to say though is, what happens like during, say, young adulthood, say you have 2 women they've each gotten married, they have children, they're trying to pursue careers, And they also really, really care about each other. They love each other as friends and aren't afraid to show that, but they also are placing a lot of demands on each other. So there can be like a testy thing going on there, because a tension can be created between, our affection for each other and the kind of demands we're making on each other.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I've given an example there that
yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Then there's two final interactional dialectics. One is called the dialectic of judgment and acceptance. And to me, this is one, I really find this so very intriguing. In fact, in many ways, it inspired the compass of friendship, this notion of judging with friends and our capacity and extent to which we judge friends, okay? And it goes like this. Okay, judgment and acceptance. One of the great virtues of friendship is that we accept each other.
Yeah.
I think one of the wonderful depictions of friendship that I've heard is a friend is someone who looks at you who sees you in the way you like to be seen.
Yeah.
You come into the presence of a friend, and a friend just affirms you. They accept you. They know you, and it feels good to be in their presence.
Yeah.
Okay. Acceptance is huge with friends. Okay. Now, what's kind of not always talked about is we judge each other as being worthy of that acceptance. We have standards. The friends that we love are people that share our values, share our understanding of the well-lived life, what it means to be a good person. One of the reasons why we accept and love this person so much is they stand for a lot of the things we stand for.
Yeah.
So right there, paired with this acceptance is its basis in judgment. So in a dialectical perspective, what happens with dialectical tensions is they're both mutually opposing.
Yes.
They're and mutually conditioning. So they create the possibility of each other, judgment and acceptance, at the same time that they're in tension with each other. It's magnificent in my view in terms of what can kind of help explain the pulse of a relationship, moments of anguish, moments of joy,
Yeah.
So with judgment and acceptance, here's the pinch. And we all know this. I talk with my students about it all the time. Your friend comes in and says, "How do you like my hair?" Like, I didn't know you were going to get it cut that short, and you don't like it. Well, no, it's not. Okay, now let's say, your friend's done her hair up in a certain way that's kind of wild, and she's getting ready to go to a job interview, and she says, "How do you like my hair?" And you go, "Look, that would be great if we were going out dancing or to a party. You do not want to have your hair like this for the job interview." Yeah. See, a friend cares enough to judge, because what I've learned is what mediates this relationship between judgment and acceptance is, instead of being judgmental with friends, we're judicious. And we exercise judicious judgment, because we care. And so the pinch with friends is, how do I know as a friend when you're asking for my true judgment here, or you're wanting me to accept you and support you? That can cause problems between friends.
Are you supposed to go, "Looks great"? Is that what they're looking for? Or is this the time to say, "This is not going to work and here's why"? Because of the job interview, right? Like,
and because you care, you don't want her to fail. And you don't say she's going on a date. You say, "Come on, that's making you look like this. That's not you," Or you'll go, they're getting ready to go on a date, and you're saying, "I'm not going to mention this now. It'll make her feel weird right before she walks out the door. So, hey, you look good. See you later." And then when she comes home, "Listen, you're going to talk about your hair." See.
But it's really, do you think then this particular dialectic is dependent on how well someone knows someone else and has that ability in which to read when to say, "Looks great," and then they'll tell them later, or to clearly state what they mean and use that judgment judiciously, like you mentioned? Does that come with ability to read people, or does that come with knowing, or maybe some other factors?
Well, I would say both. I mean, and that's I mean, it's a keen point. I mean, we understand what hurts this person's feelings. We understand the situation they're in. We've been in situations where people have said similar things and it's hurt them, or people have, been chill and they've really been pleased. Did you notice how chill they were about my whatever? And you realize, maybe I need to be a little chill once in a while. Okay. Let me answer that question in conjunction with the last dialectic.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Which is the dialectic of expressiveness and protectiveness. And it's kind of hand in glove with judgment and acceptance, and it relates to the question you just asked me, which is to say this. We have to express ourselves to each other to become friends. We disclose things about ourselves, and we also comment, we say things to each other about what each other's doing. I mean, we express our thoughts and feelings. They could be disclosing about me. They could be just commenting on you or saying something about you. Okay, so we need expressiveness. However, we also need protectiveness. As individuals, okay, I need to protect certain things because they make me me. There's some things that very possibly across the long haul of life, my close friends know about me just from spending time with me. We don't even have to tell them. They just realize it. But there's some things that I'm not going to tell my friend, first of all, because they make me me, and there's no reason I don't want to tell anybody. The other thing is I don't want to burden you. Mm-hmm. If I tell you this now, you know this. It's like I've talked to people who'll say, their friends will confide in them, and then it's like, wow, I wish you hadn't told me that. Now I know that, and I can't not know this now. You've burdened me.
Yeah, and then you have to carry that.
The compass of friendship starts with a case of two friends in a small town where one friend told the other he was going to torch his business.
Yeah.
I mean, what a cross to bear, for that person. So there's expressiveness, but there's also need for protectiveness. I need to protect myself. I also need to protect you. So I know what hurts your feelings. So there's certain things I shouldn't say. So just keep my peace. Why say it? It doesn't need to be said. So in line with a thing you mentioned a while back in our conversation, Alysa, what I think I brought to social thinking about friendship in the early 80s, 1983 is when I published the piece on openness is problematic in ongoing friendships, and then the piece on negotiating close friendship, the dialectic of conjunctive freedoms. That's the dialectic of expressiveness and protectiveness, and the dialectic of the freedom to be independent and the freedom to be dependent. Okay, I basically said friendships are rife with tension. They're inherent tensions, and that's one of the, I think, real contributions that I made early on, and I really think they form the pulse of relationships.
Mm-hmm. So then I think that, and as you're saying all these pieces, I'm nodding my head because I'm like, use that, cited that, read that, and also list some for the listeners in the show notes so they can check out your work as well as connecting to your books, so they can check it out if they're so interested to learn more. And you have brought so much to the field in understanding friendship. And so I know that there is a level, you mentioned there's both personal and professional aspects of why you started studying friendship. So perhaps this covers, the answer deals with professional, but what do you think in the last 40 years that you have learned about friendship, whether it be a specific outcome from a study or just from even a personal experience? What do you think is some of the most important things that you have learned about friends? Might be a loaded question.
No, it's a powerful question, Alysa. It kind of takes my breath away, and I'm also honored to be asked that by you. I love learning. It's my term for research is learning. I like to learn, and I've really been thankful for the people who have participated in my research. I've used to a large extent, open-ended interviews, and it's generous of people to share their lives with us. And I've learned a lot from every single person I've listened to. I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
And when I wrote Friendship Matters, one of the main things I learned, it really struck me, is because, I look at friendship across the life course, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and later adulthood. I learned that across the life course, people use almost the exact same phrases to describe what a close friend is to them. Okay, and they say 3 expectations of a close friend. And I just found it to be extraordinary. First of all, somebody you can talk to. All right. I think that still holds water. I don't think it's somebody you can text with. I don't think it's somebody you can chat with. I think it's somebody you can talk to, which means this person listens. Listening's so vital. This person makes time for you, to speak with you, to hear you out, maybe to offer, talk together. That one. Cross the life course.
Yeah.
From, early adolescence, I talked to a woman 100 years old. I mean,
Wow.
The defining friendship. Secondly, someone you can depend on. So we're back to the freedoms that we gift each other, and people use the phrase, my friend was there for me. And people say, when I ask them to define friendship, they say, well, how many people does anybody have that if your car broke down at 2 a.m, you could call them and they would drop everything and be there for you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a litmus test. And so somebody you can talk to, somebody you can depend on. And then the third one I just love. Someone you enjoy. I mean, let's not lose sight of this. We've been talking about the tensions. We've been talking about a variety of issues relating to what can cause, tensions between friends. We enjoy our friends.
Yes.
we take pleasure in our friends, and that was talked about across the life course. So that was one thing I learned early on, and I continue to witness it in the people that I learn with. A second aspect of friendship that's really called out to me, and it came partly with writing The Compass of Friendship, is understanding. I mean, at the same time that I'm concerned about how, in a variety of ways, friendship has been made a bit more superficial by social media, one thing I want to insist upon, and I wrote a piece about teaching as a mode of friendship. Okay, I don't know if you've seen that. It was in Communication Theory.
I don't know that I have, but that is something that I would be really interested in reading more about. That one I'm not familiar with.
I think it's like 2000. I think it's a lead essay. I think you'd really like it.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed in talking about teaching as a mode of friendship is people, when you start talking about friendship, tend to think about that close relationship. And it's important. We've been talking about that. But what I've really started to have a profound recognition of is, at the end of Friendship Matters, one thing I noticed about friendship in later life is the question, which is more important for us? That close friend who's known us all our lives, who we just love dearly and trust with any of our thoughts and feelings, or the friends that pull us out, get us involved, get us doing things, they may be more lightly held. They may not be as close or as disclosive. So, I mean, the notion of intimacy versus companionship.
Yeah.
So I started writing The Compass of Friendship because I was wondering about the compass. I mean by compass, what is the reach of friendship? Okay, how far can friendship reach across differences?
Yeah.
Okay, how big of a divide can friendship help us to cross together, or to reach across the differences, so we can work together, share a planet, husband an ecosystem, Okay, what role could friendship play in that? And then the second notion of compass is, moral direction, provide us with direction in our lives. So interestingly enough, both of those questions, all three of those questions, found me very interested in Aristotle's notion of dyadic friendship and civic friendship. And dyadic friendship, also called true friendship, is a close dyadic relationship. And civic friendship or political friendship involves numbers of people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And close friendship involves a mutual bond, whereas civic friendship involves concern for common goods. What Hannah Arendt might call the world that is between us. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then this got me really clear in my mind about friendship as a freestanding relationship that's valued in and of itself, and this notion of friendship as a dimension and part of other relationships. And so another thing I've learned is really trying to understand that there is truly a gamut of friendships that have each has, there's overlap in them, but what I'm trying to say is friendship has a lot to offer the well-lived life, from both our closest bonds to simply the kind of friendships that happen when I can't help but salute John McCain. So many people saluting him, his recent death, and the people that talked about him as friends of theirs. And there were dear friends, Joe Biden talking about him as a close friend, other people talking about him as a man who could reach across the aisle, someone you could disagree, you could really have different convictions, but you cared about these United States, you were custodians of a democracy. And so there is where and so the compass of friendship really tries to deal with and think about. One of my favorite chapters in that book is embracing the ethical and political potentials of friendship. Friendship wants to contribute to the well-lived life for both individuals and communities, and that's become it's just become very important for me. So it's drawn me, and then the other thing, it's drawn me out and to be concerned with a lot of things. I have to say I'm so deeply, deeply concerned with the divisive, ugly discourse going on in our country right now and modeled by the chief executive of this country right now. It's horrible. It's ugly. So when you talk about the aesthetics of humane communication, it's ugly to talk like a sixth grader. It's ugly to say mean things to people. This is something people should know. This is something that our friends teach us, hopefully. Okay. Anyway, so another fundamental issue, and it's from the get-go, Alysa, is because friends only stay friends to the extent that we're fulfilling each other's mutual expectations, friendship teaches us a lot about what it means to communicate in an affirming, ethical way, in a way that takes other people's needs seriously, across the life course. And meanwhile, because it's voluntary and because these other relationships, as we've talked about, are many times given precedence over friendship. Yeah. I really liked your point about romantic relationships. I'm interviewed a lot of times on Valentine's Day, and I say, how come there isn't a friendship day with the same significance?
Yes.
Valentine's Day is one of the loneliest days of the year for a lot of people. There are folks who aren't presently in a close romantic relationship, but I'm hoping they have friends, So the reason I think it's so interesting that you mentioned romantic relationships, family relationships, where's the place for friendship, is friendship often takes a back seat to other relationships. Okay. The classic and not happy example of, the close friend who suddenly gets a romantic partner and then doesn't have time for their friends. Okay. We know about that. We're happy for them, but we also feel left behind. So the thing I wanted to say about that with friendship taking a back seat to other relationships is friendship is susceptible to circumstances. It's highly susceptible to circumstances. People move, people get married, people take jobs that suddenly organize their lives in ways very different from what supported our friendship. Throughout life, that's one thing I've learned too, that friendships are highly susceptible to circumstances. So, what advice do you give people on trying to sustain friendships across the life course? Number one, make time for your friends, because there's so many features of contemporary life, as well as life as long as we've known it, that can pull against friendship, that can crowd out friendship, that can, place demands on us that make friendship a luxury. Okay. In fact, one wise person, Caspar Nagel, at one point argued that, friendship might be a measure of how much choice we have in our life. Mm-hmm. Our capacity to be friends might be a measure of how much freedom we have in our lives. And I'm back to the theme of freedom living at the heart of friendship. Okay. So you need to make time for your friends. It takes effort. I wrote a piece about being there and growing apart in adulthood. Friends grow apart. It's a double meaning. They get involved in their lives being organized in different ways, mm-hmm. and it might even literally separate them by thousands of miles. Yeah. And then while they're separated, they might grow apart from each other because they're growing, but they're not growing in each other's presence, okay? Social media keeps us in touch. We could argue, but what I argue is the biggest chasm across the living life for keeps and the long haul of adulthood is time. Mm-hmm. Making time for friends. The second thing I would say is this: commit yourself to listening. Learn how to listen. In my mind, few things prosper a friendship more richly than listening to each other. And I've talked about listening in a piece called Hearing Voices, okay? And I've talked about it and saying it's an active passivity. You're devoting energy to listen to someone. You're there. You've shown up. You're in the moment, but you ain't talking. Yeah. You're listening. And you're listening for what they mean and what they care about and why they need to speak with you. Yeah. Really important. Really important.
This is great advice. These are things that I was just talking about listening in class on Wednesday.
Good for you.
And what that entails and why it's important. And time always seems to be a theme throughout talking to people, like difficulty in making friendships, or when there's transitions, turning points in friendships, and time changes how much time you have together if you're geographically apart from each other. So time, I think, is a common theme. And so because it's come up so consistently, I think that indicates how important it is to consider. And then I think listening is something that people maybe take for granted, right? That, well, I was there with you, so that was fine. Or, it's one of those things that you might hear from people, well, I talk every day, so I'm good at it, or I'm listening all the time, but it is actually a skill that needs to be learned and practiced and honed. And
absolutely. I agree. Well, good for you. I mean, I deeply believe that. You mentioned too about people having trouble forming friends. I mean, a few things I've learned about that. I mean, one of the things I would try to encourage is to understand how important small talk is. I was raised during the hippie years where folks were, afraid to be plastic, afraid to, they wanted to talk deep, they wanted to get deep, let's go deep, You can't go deep instantly. Small talk is what leads to big talk. Be comfortable with just, talking about whatever comes up, and this is where it works with listening. That person may want to talk about, that they can't believe, how much, the trees in this area have changed, or whatever it is. They might want to talk about sports. They might want to talk about. All I'm saying is, this small talk can lead to bigger talk.
Yes.
Let's just talk. Let's talk. We'll see where it goes. Let's not force it.
Yes.
We all have hated the stranger on the plane, that suddenly told us all these deep things. I don't know you, and I've got all this stuff too quick. Let's just relax. Let's just relax. And small talk can lead to bigger talk. I believe in that too.
Do you have other ideas? Because that is something that from when I started this podcast, I was really thinking about how we can celebrate friendships. And I think that really sort of reflects, maybe I didn't think about it as I was doing it, but as we're talking now, I think it really reflects your book, The Compass of Friendship, in the sense that I interviewed my brother and I called that episode Siblingships, and how we became friends.
Nice.
We've talked about teacher-student relationships. I even had an episode on pets as friends, like conceptualizing them that way, even though they can't necessarily talk back to us, right?
Nice.
And so I think that there is that reach, that there are a lot of different types of friendship. And I would definitely call both my mom and my dad friends. And that wasn't something I would have done when I was in my teens, for sure.
Oh, no,
but I think it developed in my 20s. And in fact, my parents will be here tomorrow. We're going to go out to lunch, and they live about an hour away. And so we get to see each other a lot. And so I think that is something in this past year that the podcast has been able to do, is sort of showcase different types of friendship. And so really reflecting that idea there.
Sounds outstanding. Yeah. Alysa, outstanding.
Which I appreciate. And I know there's more. So there's more friendships to celebrate, and different kinds of friendships to celebrate. But there is a consistent idea of that making friends is difficult, and that small talk leads to big talk, I think, is really an important point. But I also think that it is really hard for people when there seems to be people are primarily making their friendships or relationships online. If you think about romantic relationships, there's the Tinders and the Bumbles and the it isn't meeting someone like, say, how my parents met, or maybe how you and your wife met, for example.
Yes.
That I think there's a lot of feelings of loneliness, and so that is something that, as someone who loves friends, and you talked about what are the moments that probably brought people a lot of happiness, I can say a lot of those have been with friends. And so for me, I feel like I've had a well-lived life with friends at this point. But that is not the case for everyone, and that I am reminded that there is a lot of experiences of rejection and loneliness. And so that's something that I would like to consider further on the podcast, even looking into programs on campuses, on my campus and that sort of thing, to talk about that. I'm just curious about your thoughts. Is loneliness, has that been increasing? Is it a feeling that's always there, has always been there? Is it that social media makes us feel lonelier, makes us feel more connected, just we don't have anyone to physically do anything with? And I'm just trying to figure out how to conceptualize and really think about friendship as it relates to loneliness, that if people have friends and you view that, does that make people feel lonely, right? Like, I've even thought, do my podcast episodes that celebrate a special friendship or a unique friendship or just someone's typical friendship story, does that make people feel lonelier, and how to sort of combat that? And I'm wondering what thoughts you might have on the topic.
That's a very extremely well raised question. It's a very compassionate question. I really appreciate your, what kind of drives and motivates you in studying this topic. I can hear it and how you frame that question, and also some very useful thinking about, Kenneth Burke, who's one of my heroes, says many times, when someone asks a well-formulated question, the answer's already in the question, and you've, I think, accomplished a lot of that in that question, because, the one thing is, has there always been loneliness? Yes. And I published Friendship Matters in 1992. And another thing I learned in that book that I've really been struck by for years, and that I think my students find very, very comforting when we talk about friendship in my interpersonal communication classes. And that is that the transition to college is the lonely, for people who are blessed enough and fortunate enough to attend college, they report the greatest loneliness than at any other point in the entire North American middle class life course.
Wow.
More loneliness than later adults living alone. The transition to college is the greatest amount of loneliness.
Yeah.
Okay. So the thing for students to realize is you're not alone in feeling lonely. Okay.
Yeah.
Even that person that's acting like they've got it all on a string, or that they're the queen or king of the week, chances are they're feeling this dislocation and this kind of radical repositioning of themselves in their lives. It's exciting.
Yeah.
But then the second part is what you were talking about, which I appreciate, is so now we've got the social media context. And we all know about FOMO. We all know about the fear of missing out. So everybody's posting all these airbrushed and unbelievably staged photos of them doing the greatest things that ever was done by anybody and having more happiness than, the best piece of pizza that was ever made in the Western Hemisphere. And this kind of stuff. This kind of stuff, I think, can really accumulate. You know, well, where's my unbelievable piece of pizza? Where's my perfectly beautiful group of friends that are at the exact neatest place in the whole area doing the coolest thing? Where am I not in that picture?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry about that, and we've all felt it for different reasons at different points. We all feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're all vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the important thing to stress about loneliness is one thing, at least for our students that we're trying to guide and help, is that you're not alone in feeling this way. And even talking about friendship itself as a problematic relationship is a way of saying, guess what? Even those people who have friends are experience problems in those friendships.
Yeah.
Okay? I think it's important to take loneliness seriously. It's not a matter, another thing I would point out, which is just wants to punch social media right in the face, goes like this, if you'll pardon the kind of aggressive imagery.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who would do that.
Yeah.
It goes like this. It's a matter of quality of relationships. It's not a matter of quantity. I mean, it only takes one person to kind of understand you and to start doing things together to alleviate a lot of loneliness. It's not a matter, again, a lot of these pictures of groups of people together. That's why David Reisman wrote The Lonely Crowd. Americans are historically lonely in a crowd. Okay, so it's not quantity of relationships, it's quality. All right, and so I would like people to understand that. The other thing I would say is, and you're right, this was also a keen part of your question, it really seems like what most people are doing is being online, okay? So there's a lot of games and this and that, and incidentally, I think people do make friends playing games together, but it gets to something I want to mention, which is try to think about things that you like to do. What are your interests? What nourishes you? I mean, what are the things you like to do? And then start trying to suss out places or sites or opportunities to do that with others. Take the risk. Take the risk of joining that club. Take the risk of reaching out online and finding out in your town if there's people who are Civil War buffs, people who are a Beatle fan club, or any number of things. Take the risk because you have to start doing things with folks to do things with folks. And one of the real important bases for friendship is sharing common interests. And so there's where online can kind of serve as an assist, but not an end in itself, check out what's available, what are certain clubs. And I know it sounds homely, but find out if there's folks that are interested in some of the same things you are. Yeah. Then we can small talk about it and later on talk bigger about it.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, like we all have our own things that interest us and nourish us, as you say, and And there's often a group of people interested in that same topic, say on Facebook. And they might be like a closed group that you have to join the group. And a lot of times then, depending on where people live, you might actually be able to meet up with them. And my best friend Kate and I have a similar interest. We joined a Facebook group, and then there was a meetup in town, and we met 4 of our other really great friends that way.
That's terrific.
And most people would say, who would you meet from online? But the thing is, we already had, it makes the small talk easier because you know what people are interested in.
Yes.
So you can ask questions, and you have already things that you would want to talk about. And then it can lead into, and that's been it'll be 2 years in January that we met up for the first time. And we have a group text that's always, I can see my phone down below lighting up, and I'm sure that's the group text. And we get together, we do mailings of gifts to each other. You know, we just do different things. And it all started with joining a Facebook group and then taking the risk to go to a meetup. And
it's exciting.
And me and Kate, of course, had a signal. If we were like, this doesn't feel cool, it's time to go.
Absolutely. That's nice. So you kind of escorted, it helped a bit.
Yes, and we kind of cheated. Everyone else took a real big risk by going by themselves, and we took the shared risk of going together.
That's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I think, if anything, spending the last 40 years studying friendship has made me very grateful for the friends that I do have, and very appreciative of how much they've contributed to my living well.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I would say is, and I theorized this in Friendship Matters, I theorized marriage as a cross-sex friendship, if you're, or a cross-gendered friendship. And and that's where I would also feel a tremendous amount of gratitude to my wife, Sandy, who has been a marvelous friend to me throughout. And much of what I've learned about friendship, I've literally learned with her, both living our life together and then talking and thinking about the ideas that I was hoping to share with others. So I guess that was something I would say as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I feel like I might have known some of this beforehand in the sense of having read your work, but now talking to you, I can definitely say that you are a wealth of knowledge, that you have contributed so much to our understanding of friendship in the field. And I don't think that I would be able to do what I was doing without someone like you having started the research or going, why is this overlooked, right? That I might still be fighting more of a battle of why I would be studying this topic. And I just feel that I think in your work you can see it, but in your voice you can hear your passion for what you do and the study of friendship. And I've been taking notes because I use it as a way to develop things that I need for the podcast and that sort of thing. But it's also been one of those conversations that I immediately want to go and do something. Like, I'm inspired about another podcast episode or
good for you,
the paper I'm working on. And so I just want to say thank you so much for being you and for doing what you've done and for loving what you do and for being here on the podcast. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you would agree to be on the podcast. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Alysa. Yeah, I mean, you're a really generous soul, and I really appreciate how open you are and willing to just talk about how much you care about your work and what it could mean. And it was very kind of you to say what you said to me. You sure as heck made my week.
Well, I'm glad I could do that. You've made mine. We made each other's weeks.
That's great. That's great.
What a conversation I had with Bill Rawlins. He is amazing and has had a wonderful career, that has had an impact on so many people. And I hope by having him on the podcast and sharing his research throughout my year on Best Forevers has been a way to impact you additionally. So as I was chatting with him, there were several things that stuck out to me that I wanted to discuss. First, I think about his contributions to communication research and his continued care in teaching students and conducting research on this topic. As a student of communication research and someone who now studies friendship, I am 100% grateful and in awe of his commitment to learn, which he called doing research. Because without it, we would not know as much as we do regarding friendship and the dialectic tensions experience. And certainly myself and other researchers in the communication field, we wouldn't be here without him. Or that in part his work has influenced us. And I just think about all the friendship research scholars that I've had on the podcast, and I bet every single one of them would say that Bill Rawlins has impacted them in some way. To me, the passion that we have for our life's work and the causes that are important to us that we speak on, that's what truly makes a difference. And I see that in Bill Rawlins, and it inspires me to continue learning, teaching, and podcasting in hopes that I can have some kind of impact on others like Bill has had. Second, I love this notion of living beautifully, as he talked about in the class that he's currently teaching. That if we were asked the question, what has brought you the most joy in life, that our answers are likely to include our friends. Friendships are ones that we choose. These are the people that we want in our life. We finally have choices. So these are the people who are special to us. What makes these relationships special, that we choose them. And they are so far reaching, as he discusses in his book, Compass of Friendship. Our friends are the ones we talk to, depend on, and bring us joy in life. So when we find those friends, no matter the number, if it's one person, 5 people, or 15, that we must make the time for our friends because, as his book says, friendship matters. We live together, we grow old together, and we live well-lived lives together. And I just love that idea that friends can lead us to having these beautiful, well-lived lives. However, though, third, consequently, friends can also be the ones that hurt us the most. And so I think his 4 dialectical tensions help us understand and balance our realities of friendship with the ideals and expectations that we hold, that we can learn how to communicate with our friends, to communicate better, to consider the communication patterns that result from these tensions, and how we can negotiate these friendships because we understand that tensions aren't inherent. These things are going to happen. Not everything is simply joyful, that it is altogether what makes life, what makes friendship, what makes these relationships. And I think it's funny to think now how much this has intersected my life, the way I approach friendship, the way I think about things. Because think about this podcast. The introduction talks about celebrating friendships and then considering the issues that might plague friendships. That I focus both on the joys that Bill talks about and the tensions that Bill talks about. That it is no doubt that his reading and his work is what has, it's just infiltrated my way of being and living and breathing. And to me, looking at friendship in this way is a more complete picture. It has a more nuanced understanding that we needed when he started doing research, that we've learned a lot from, and that we could still consider today as we negotiate and manage our friendships. Finally, I think there's a lot more to learn about friendship as we continue to manage the use of technology in making, maintaining, and ending friendships, combating loneliness and feelings of FOMO, that fear of missing out, and consideration of how civic friendships may impact the divisiveness that our society is experiencing right now. There's so much that we can extrapolate from existing research from Bill's work, especially to help communicate in these difficult situations. And so I am dedicated as a researcher, as a teacher, but also as a podcaster because of this. I want to dedicate more future podcast episodes to start to break these issues down more and provide advice that can assist us in managing the situations in our lives and friends. Again, Bill inspires me, and I hope this episode has inspired you as well. Because simply put, friendship matters, and we must take the risk, we must put in the time, and we must listen. And here I am, listening. Friends, I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this interview and the work of Dr. Bill Rawlins. Please email me any questions, thoughts, comments, feedback, or stories that were fueled by this particular episode, and you can send those to bestforeverspod@gmail.com. Or you can check out the surveys tab on the podcast webpage, www.bestforeverspod.com. Remember, folks, I'm not nosy. I just love to geek out on friendship. And another way that you can join me and share your thoughts with me is follow me on social media. I love to have you follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Best Forevers Pod, or me personally as a professor at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. There are 2 points I would like to make about Facebook. First, I have a closed group where we talk about these topics more in depth, and listeners and I are interacting. And so if you'd like to be part of that conversation, if you'd like to learn more about friends, comment more about friends, or just see more friendship in your newsfeed, then go ahead and join Best Forevers Pod. That is the closed group. And or you can also like Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, which is a public Facebook page where I provide updates on the podcast and reminders of when new episodes release. Social media is a great way to follow podcast updates and get involved with discussions and other items related to friendship. I look forward to us connecting. I'd also like to remind you of the campaign I just launched called Join Alysa on a Bench. What this campaign focuses on is bringing buddy benches to the locations in which we need to encourage friendship and communication the most. Schools, parks, campuses, or anywhere else that friendship is important. And I'm really dedicated to this idea that buddy benches are a way to encourage conversations, support, understanding, inclusion. And so I'm really dedicated to collecting benches, giving some tender love and care to these benches, and donating to the places that I just mentioned. And so what I'm looking for is people who support this idea and would like to join me on a bench. And what that means, and you can go to my webpage, bestforeverspod.com, and click on the tab, Join Me on a Bench, to learn more about it. But specifically, I'm looking for either one-time donations at paypal.me/bestforeverspod or continued support on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Donations can help me acquire benches, whether they be bench donations or money to make benches or to buy benches. The donations can help me update benches or get them ready to be outside or indoors. And then as well as one of the things I'm really excited about is that everyone who donates gets their name etched into a bench. And so when people sit down, they can be reminded that there is friendship out there, that we all deserve to be happy, healthy, and safe, and that we deserve friendship. And maybe starting a conversation or supporting someone who's sitting on the bench is the first step in doing so. So I would love to have your support. And if you would like to join me on a bench, you can make a one-time donation or join me on Patreon, as I just mentioned. Or there's another way to help get the word out. I would love to have photos of you on a bench. Show me that you've joined me on a bench. You can either send me pictures of you by yourself on a bench with your friends, your family, anyone you might consider a kindred spirit, and I will take those photos and include it in the campaign to join Alysa on a bench. And folks, if you're like, you know what, I don't have a lot of photos of me sitting on benches, Alysa, because apparently I do. I have so many pictures of me sitting on benches. It's ridiculous. You can maybe make a plan to get together with a friend, go get some coffee, find a bench, take a photo together, and tweet it at me, tag me in it on Instagram, share it in the Best Forevers Pod Facebook group, or send it to me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com, and I can use it to spread awareness. Please come join me on a bench. I'm saving you a seat. If you care about friendship like I do and want to support Best Forevers, you might consider supporting the movement to love on our friends more on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, I just mentioned it when talking about the benches, but benches are one thing that I'm doing through Patreon, but there's so much more. You can go on the webpage and you can see all the different levels of being a friend with benefits, where you get cool perks and swags, and you can see the goals that I have regarding the support from all of you as patrons. You can see the things that you will get, the swag, the extra clips, the early release of episodes, videos, and so much more. I have so many ideas for sharing more with all of you friends with benefits. And certainly if you have ideas, I'd love to hear from you as well. So come join me and Best Forevers on Patreon. Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. I appreciate every single listen, like, follow, post, and retweet. Please subscribe, rate, and review Best Forevers. It's very helpful to get the word out there about the podcast, and of course, it warms my heart. And I certainly would love it if, by word of mouth, you might share this podcast with a friend. And I'd like to take a moment to just say that, this is my 47th episode, 1 year of podcasting, and to have new listeners, to have listeners from the start, to have my friends and my students and my colleagues and people I don't know in different countries and podcasters and just so many people listening to Best Forevers and supporting the movement to love on friends. I would have never imagined when I started Best Forevers, this is where I would end up. A wonderful year of experiences, a wonderful year of interviews and episodes about topics that mean so much to me and I hope mean so much to you. And I just can't wait for my second year of Best Forevers. In fact, I'm so excited about this first year and the second year to come. I'm going to release a special episode where people have sent in questions that I answer. People have sent me their thoughts about the podcast, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what's to come. So you can look for that. This episode, obviously, if you're listening to it, it's September 28th or after, and that special raw episode of Loving on Friends will be released on the exact date, September 30th, my 1-year anniversary, and hashtag International Podcast Day. So I hope that you will join me. This week's promo is from someone you've heard of before, and I can't think of a better person in podcasts to promo and support and give a shout out to on my 1-year anniversary and on International Podcast Day. And that is Heather Welch from Sunshine and Power Cuts. Heather is one of the first podcasters that I ever interacted with, and she is one of my fiercest supporters and loyal listeners. And it's been such a joy to get to know her over the last year, to have our journey of podcasting together and to be a part of each other's experiences and to be able to collaborate. And so you have definitely heard from Heather because I've shared her promo before, as well as she was a guest on the International Purple Shirt Friends episode back in August. And I've also been on Sunshine and Power Cuts, episode 14, Connections. And she's invited me to be part of her Sunshine Summit twice, once in March and just recently again in August. And those links I will be sharing. You can find those in the show notes so that you can take a look at all the things that Heather has been doing. But let me tell you a little bit more about Sunshine and Power Cuts in case you haven't had a chance to listen. And let me tell you, friends, you do want to listen because Heather is a wonderful podcaster with a sweet, sweet, sweet New Zealand accent voice. Heather, you know I love you. And she could read anything to me and I'd be like, yeah, I'm listening. You got my full attention. But her podcast focuses on living off the grid. So it focuses on episodes of sunshine when she connects with nature and how the sun comes in and allows us to power up as individuals, but as well as powering up her home and the things that she needs to do on a daily basis. And then she also has the Power Cut episodes, which focus on when nature doesn't cooperate and there's a breakdown in the system and she's without power. And so this is what I love so much about her podcast is that we have so much in common and we do two completely different things. She's talking about living off the grid and I'm talking about friendships, but deep down we are talking about connections and the disruptions to those connections. So as I talk about the joys and tensions of friendship, she is talking about the sunshine and power cuts of living off the grid. And so I highly recommend that you subscribe, rate, and listen to Sunshine and Power Cuts with Heather Welch. And it seems suiting to talk about Sunshine and Power Cuts and Heather on this particular episode because my anniversary date is International Podcast Day. And she is going to be doing a live chat to celebrate connections for International Podcast Day 2018. It takes place on September 29th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you're like, hey, I thought September 30th was International Podcast Day. It is because 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is 2 p.m. New Zealand time because Heather is in the future. But you don't want to miss it. Get it into your calendar. And when I have more information, I will share the link so that you can learn more about Heather and her celebration of connections. So until next time, friends, consider how you live your life beautifully through friendships because without our friends, who would we be?
Hello, it's Heather from Sunshine and Power Cuts, the podcast that features two types of episodes which alternate. The Sunshine ones offer inspiration drawn from nature, but in the Power Cut ones, I share honest insights into my life living off the power grid in rural New Zealand. If you'd like to check it out, it can be found where good podcasts can be downloaded, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SunPowerPod. Until then, be empowered by nature.